when the man comes.
Kraven the Hunter. We are going to dive in and do spoilers and talk about all the characters, talk about some of the big beats of the movie. But before we do that, we're just going to give our general impressions of the film. So if you don't want to be spoiled by the plot points and the happenings within the movie, you're still safe and you're still good. We will give an official spoiler warning when that time comes, but we're just going to start off with some general big picture thoughts on Kraven the Hunter. So with everything out the way, man, I will pass it to you. What did you think about this latest Sony Marvel film, Kraven the Hunter?
I am so happy that this is over. Oh my God, am I elated that this part of the Sony Spider-Man universe, whatever they decided to call it, is over, especially when they have the audacity to even put Spider-Man in the name of the universe. And he yet to show up one time. Actually drives me crazy. But here we are. Kraven the Hunter is finally here, and it is utterly flawed top to bottom. It's not a good movie. It has no personality. There's bad ADR. The formula that they try to go with is predictable. There are things in the film that actually they try to give a tribute to Kraven the Hunter in a comic book level, and it only did the opposite for me. It actually kind of pissed me off. I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. It just overall feels like a movie that is super fake. It almost feels like I'm back in some late 90s world where they were just releasing random TV, DVD superhero films that no one ever talked about ever again. There's so much life that has been sucked out of this movie and this franchise, whatever it is, and you can feel it in every single beat in Kraven the Hunter. It's not an enjoyable film. I found myself bored a lot of the times, and yeah, it just wasn't fun at all. Aaron Taylor Johnson, in some ways I want to say I'm sorry. Like, it's not you, man. We know how talented Aaron Taylor Johnson is. On the other side, I'm like, you had to say yes, bro. Like, why you didn't have to say yes to this movie? Like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, part of me is like, dang it, why'd you have to go and say yes? But man, Russell Crowe is fun to watch. Aaron Taylor Johnson, whenever there's small moments of what the movie could be, is fun to watch. Ariana DeBose, I was happy she was here, but she is, I don't even know why her character is really truly in the film. She's just here to move the plot along. She's like we're gonna put her in here just so we can say let's move the plot. Here she is. Let's move the plot with her character. That's the only reason she exists here. Fred Hetchinger. I can never say his name. Fred Hetchinger. Still can't say it. Man, such a good actor. He's another one I'll be like, dang, I want to apologize to you too, because you did what you could in the movie, bro. Like, you did what you could. You had a character, you did, but the movie around you was just not good enough, bro. I'm so sorry. Another good actor that is wasted. They put, I feel like, more effort in this film a little bit, in terms of, they were like, we're gonna go get A-list talent and hope that saves the movie. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Because I think the cast is brilliant. Russell Crowe, Ariana DeBose, Aaron Taylor Johnson. Like, you put those people on paper, you're like, man, I'm about to see a good movie. Nah, not the way they constructed this thing. It just ends up being an utter disaster. This movie also works closer towards a lot of the other Sony Marvel films are a little bit more fantastical, right? Like, Morbius is a vampire. Like, you know what I'm saying? Madam Web is like, she's very Spider-Man-y and she can see the future and things like that. Kraven seeks to be, I think, a little more grounded in what it's trying to do. Although, I mean, he is ridiculous. He's Kraven. He's still jumping off of stuff crazy. But it does try to read closer to what a crazy high action blockbuster would be. Kind of closer to what a John Wick would be. They try a little bit harder to make things realistic. This is the first, one of the first R-rated. I forgot what the stat is, but it is R-rated and fits in its own narrative. And it's just like, oh my God, I can finally see blood. But it's taken so much of some of these other plot points in other movies and brought it here, and it makes for another boring tale in the way of Sony Marvel universe. So yeah, man, Kraven the Hunter. There's a couple of glimpses of like, oh, that was actually a decent action scene. Oh, that was actually not that bad to see. But when I get to the point of saying that wasn't that bad, I know the movie is probably pretty bad. And that is Kraven the Hunter for me, man. It's not good. It's unenjoyable. And once again, I'm very happy to say that this is the death of the Sony Spider-Man Marvel Universe.
I don't know if it's the death yet. I think we do have to.
Oh, I hope
we have to litigate that.
let me add hope in there. Yeah, let me put an asterisk.
Kraven the Hunter. Wow. Somehow we managed to end up back in the very same place that we were earlier this year with the release of Madam Web, and we have another embarrassment on our hands. Kraven the Hunter is an embarrassing effort. Unfortunately, this movie is it's so bad, and it's really just unfortunate. I get no pleasure out of this. I take no joy in seeing a film that I want to be really good, featuring a character that I'm super excited about, that I've wanted to see on the big screen for years, and to see the final effort, the final on-screen product, and to sit there for 2+ hours and experience what this film was just such a disappointing experience. But really, by the time I reached about 30 minutes into the movie, the disappointment turned into ambivalence, just complete and utter removal from emotional state of being, because that's kind of what you have to do with these movies. You have to become numb to how bad what you're watching truly is. And there's almost no redeeming quality that I can say about Kraven outside of perhaps maybe Aaron Taylor Johnson himself in a few moments throughout the film. But by and large, this is just a really, really bad, rushed, sloppy effort on the part of the studio and, unfortunately, the filmmakers, who I am not taking any sort of personal shots or attacks at. But really, the final end product of this, the film itself, and in the way that it's delivered to us as an audience, it just isn't what it needs to be. It's truly just a bad, awful film in most regards, from a performance standpoint, from a technical standpoint, from a visual standpoint, from a narrative standpoint. We're kind of failing in almost every respect when it comes to the pillars of filmmaking. So what am I to say? What am I to talk about when it comes to a movie that I feel that way about? There's really not a ton to necessarily address, because now, for at least the third time, maybe some could argue more than that, but at least the third time, I've walked out of a Sony Marvel Spider-Man spinoff feature film just thinking, what the fuck was that? What were they thinking? Why did we do this? Who thought that this was a good idea? Who said, yes, that's going to play well when it arrives in theaters? Like, all of these questions just seem like they're not being asked, or at least if they are being asked, it seems like they're probably being asked way too late in the process, in which nothing can be reconciled or fixed. It's kind of too late. It's too far along to really rectify just the massive amount of mistakes that happen throughout the course of a feature film. So Kraven the Hunter, this I think at best will be remembered as one of the worst superhero outings that we've gotten on a theatrical level. At best, it's probably, maybe, potentially a film that is so bad that it can serve as the death knell for a quote unquote shared universe that has truly never worked in its entire existence. And that's just hoping. That's wishful thinking if that turns out to be true, because we don't know if that is the case. But when you have 3 strikeouts, literally within the course of just a couple of years, all of them cost a lot of money to make, and none of them, I think, are considered profitable at this particular point. Just from a fiscal standpoint, we have to ask ourselves, or we at least have to say to ourselves, we can't do this anymore. We have got to change. We have got to change. This is literally madness to continue to go down this path and to go down this route thinking that there's going to be different results, because it's just never proven to be true up until this point. So Kraven the Hunter, once again, from the part of Sony and Marvel, it's a terrible outing. It's a terrible effort, unfortunately, and it's not a movie worth your time, so you just shouldn't see it. That's really all there is to say on that part. And so with all of that out the way, let's dive into spoilers and talk about this movie and get into the nitty-gritty details of Kraven the Hunter. And spoiler for the folks who've not seen it, but a particular spoiler goes out to those who maybe have seen it, or even if you don't care to see it. We're not going to have too many good things to say about this movie. I can already tell. So it's
Yeah.
going to be a interesting conversation to get through as we talk about the characters and some of the moments in the movie that happened, and then ultimately the outlook and the future of Spider-Man spinoff films and the feature films that are produced on the part of Sony. But again, this is your spoiler warning. Go back and if you decide to check out the movie, come back and finish the rest of the conversation. And of course, we should start off with Aaron Taylor Johnson playing the titular character, Kraven, the Hunter, in this feature film. Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's had a pretty impressive career up until this point, I would say. He's turned in some good performances. He
Yeah.
hasn't blown up in particular, but he has been seen in some widely distributed films. You know, he was in Godzilla from 2014. Of course, he
Mhm.
was Quicksilver in Avengers
Yep.
Age of Ultron. And the film that actually got Sony excited about casting him was his appearance in Bullet Train a couple of years ago, the David Leitch
Mhm.
film. He had a really, really good, impressive performance in that movie. And I
Yeah.
like him in almost everything I see him in. He's really, really good, really, really talented. At one point, it was not a shoo-in that he was going to have the role. Sony had even considered going out to actors such as Brad Pitt for this role. They talked about Keanu Reeves maybe playing Kraven the Hunter. Hell, why not get Adam Driver or John David Washington? Again, all super talented actors, a couple of legends sprinkled in there. Wonder what a
Mhm.
Keanu Reeves Kraven the Hunter movie would have looked like if we got that. I don't know what that looks like, but
Nope.
Brad
Not at
Pitt
all.
Kraven the Hunter.
I don't
Um,
know. I
oh,
don't know.
I don't know what they're thinking. Who do they think they are? But we got Aaron Taylor Johnson here, who's also, heavily rumored to potentially be the next James Bond as well, right? That's also like something
Mhm.
that's been talked about for
True.
a few years now. He is British, and that can be an interesting route for him if he decides to go down that route. But again, he's sort of playing again in this big tentpole sandbox, taking on this character. And to be honest, man, he's been super enthusiastic about this the entire time. I've seen him
Yeah.
be a team player. He has been on the press tour, really talking up this
Mhm.
film, really just being out there. He was at New York Comic Con. I was at the Sony Pictures panel. He just had all the energy, just really leaning in, really
Mhm.
owning it. That's what you want to see. You want to see that enthusiasm from an actor if they step into these universes. But unfortunately, obviously, as we just alluded to, the movie around him just doesn't do him any favors. But what do you think about Aaron Taylor Johnson in this role? What he brought to the movie, and maybe even more importantly, what do you think about what they did with the Kraven character in this film? Because they do kind of change some things. They
Yeah.
change the backstory, they change how he acquires his powers. There's
Mhm.
much more of a, I guess, a scientific explanation. We find out through a very, very long flashback in the beginning of the film that he acquires his powers because his blood mixes with the lion's blood, and so he gets these enhanced abilities. What did you think about all of that? Just sort of setting the table for his performance and setting the table for the character.
Man. Craven the character, I think in Sony has kind of been doing this with these films, quite often. I am simply not interested in turning any of these villains into anti-heroes, if that makes sense, or into
Makes all the
heroes
sense.
in
Absolutely.
general. Specifically, like Venom makes sense because that's his origin. He is just an anti-hero. Like that is how he was created to be. And when I was introduced to Craven, I'm like, this dude is hunting Spider-Man. He's a villain. Simple as that. This movie does this entire thing to make turn Craven into this nighttime vigilante called the Hunter. And I is just not interested in it. I don't know. He's killing. They try to say Craven. Oh, he's killing bad people. It may be violent. He may be killing them. But instead of just saying no, this is a bad dude and he does bad things, they're like, no, he's an anti-hero. He killed in the beginning of this thing. He kind of kills bad people, and I'm just not all the way there on the idea of constantly doing that. I think there are times where good villains can and do serve in gray area. Thanos is actually a great example of, like, of course he's a villain, but when you think about his intentions and what he was trying to do, it's like low key that's not that crazy. You know what I'm saying? You're like, whoa, you kind of making some sense over here. And I think people see that gray area, and so they try to instill that in other villains, and it just doesn't work. And it doesn't work for Kraven for me. If you don't have Spider-Man, don't try to make Kraven the hero all of a sudden just because Spider-Man isn't present. That rubs me the wrong way. And so I didn't appreciate, I think, that part of his origin of kind of making him this kind of nighttime vigilante, just killing bad people per se. And when it comes to his origins, the flashback per se, what's crazy is the flashback might be like my favorite part of the movie. Like Russell Crowe was in that thing.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and
Okay.
this is why. This is right. Russell Crowe, we were sitting on him for a little bit. I was like, that's cool. And there was actually, this was the only time in the film I actually felt a little bit of small tension was with the lion. I was like, okay, there was actually a little bit of tension there. But the part I didn't like was, I think, the coincidental, here comes this black girl with this magic potion that can bring him back to life. That part is just like, okay, what are we doing? And they name her Calypso, and I'm like, wait, that's that. There's just so many questions and things here that I don't like and I don't appreciate about, because we are still in the Marvel universe, right? There are still things I think you have to respect and understand, like, and we are in Africa, so it's like she's not an X-Men, she's not, you know what I mean? Like, there's nerd stuff questions. It's almost like they try to put it in front of you, but it doesn't make sense in this context, and she was definitely one of them. So I guess, let me say, the beginning of the flashback was one of my favorites, because the end actually pissed me off. By the end of it, I'm like, no way, this girl just happens to be here because of some tarot cards, and now all of a sudden my boy got powers because he got a potion. Everything would seem to be happening too much by coincidence. But overall, when it comes to the origins of this character, I just am not interested on making these characters into anti-heroes. And I think that is a huge reason for me. I'm just like watching it like, no, this isn't Kraven that I know, or this isn't the Kraven that I wanted to enjoy. And so yeah, that took away from it a lot for me.
The introduction of Calypso, the young version of the character, it's just the most convenient, lazy bullshit ever. Like, there's truly no rationale behind, like, why she's just present. They just place her there. She just so happens to have these abilities in this tarot card, and it's just an easy way to shoehorn that character of Calypso into the story without any rhyme or reason, to be honest. But I'm all for a flashback. I just found this one to be way too long. It was like 24
it was
minutes long.
Oh my God, it was so long.
I'm just sitting here like, well, wait a second. Okay, I'm cool for a flashback. A part of this is an origin story. That's okay. But now you're also keeping your star player away from the story for an extensive amount of time. And so by the 10th minute, I'm like, where the fuck is Aaron Taylor Johnson? Why am I watching this flashback just go on and on and on? And I just mostly found it uninteresting. The best part of it is Russell Crowe, and to see just that relationship between him and Sergei, of course, Kraven, and then Dimitri, his brother. But you just have to pace out that stuff better. You just have to do a better job at figuring out how to integrate that into the story. Maybe it's broken up, I don't know, but 20 plus minutes of just that. Before we really dive into, the new modern version of Kraven as an adult, was just a fucking slog. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep for a couple of minutes. I was just
I know I did.
bored out of my mind. Like, wow, this is really, really tough to get through. And it was just so uninteresting for the most part. And I guess in the midst of that, what I want to ask you, because you brought up an interesting point just about kind of what we've been dealing with here, just the reclamation of certain villainous characters, giving them shades of gray, adding layers and complexity to them so that they become anti-heroes, or maybe even in a few situations, full-fledged heroes.
Right.
And it's so weird. It's just so weird that, because I'm usually against it. I'm usually like, we don't need to do this. Don't tell me anything about Kraven. I think the best part of that Spider-Man 2 PS5 game is that we don't know shit about that Kraven.
Yep.
He just shows up and starts to fuck shit up. It's just like, I don't need to know anything about this guy. He's a badass, and I'm afraid of him. I'm gonna have a tough time when that boss battle rolls around, and that's really all that matters. And here we get all these back story fill-ins, these implications to like why he is the way he is. He becomes kind of a family man in this movie.
Yeah.
and it doesn't work by and large. But we come off of something like the Penguin, right, where we
Mm-hmm.
by the end of it, we still, I think, fully agree. Like, he's still a villain. He still has done
Yeah,
some
for sure.
pretty shitty stuff, but you see all of that extra layers and all of that extra backstory filled in just such a brilliant, magnificent way that just feels right and natural to the character. It illuminates so much about who he is. And I'm all for, an example of that ilk and doing something to that degree when you have something to say about that character and why they are the way that they are. But um, what what do you think of that? Because it's kind of going back and forth. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you have a situation where it's like, yeah, Thanos isn't getting his own movie, but he's kind of the main character in Infinity War. We're spending a lot of time learning about him. We still hate him though. Penguin, we
Yeah.
get a show. Kraven just flat out doesn't work, and I think that's been the case even for some other characters. Your
Yeah.
Madam Webs, of course. Your Morbius is like adding all of these complexities to these characters. But then even like somebody that's super villainous, I'm thinking about Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
Maniacal, crazy as fuck.
Yep.
But even by the end of it, it's like, yeah, but Norman Osborn is obviously a tormented soul. This is
Exactly.
not him. This is the goblin personality truly taking over, and you feel things for that character. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that. Just like what that balance looks like and how to strike a better balance to that, because they just didn't manage to do it here.
Yeah, I think some of it is you kind of have to have that small beacon of light sometimes to get you to understand what even the darkness even means, right? Like that's why some of these movies just don't work. Like I feel like if maybe Spider-Man was present and there was a beacon of light, maybe we could like, oh, okay, now we know what good looks like. Why is Kraven not that? We can examine and in some ways take the opposite of what Spider-Man is. And I feel like in some of these movies where we try to play on these gray areas, maybe they don't do that. Maybe we don't say, look, this is the righteous and this is not the righteous, and this is the kind of the line that they play with. And Spider-Man, Spider-Man, of course, even had his own what's going on in his stories, but we knew and kind of met Norman Osborn in a place where by the time he was bad, we knew like, well, at least Spider-Man's still over here and he's good. I don't know. It's like it's like you kind of have to see both sides sometimes to understand how big of a gap that should actually be there. But that also takes care. That takes story beats. It's the small things that we see throughout that first Spider-Man movie. There, you're like, man, this dude is a tormented soul. Like you're saying, like we actually have to live through and go through that character to see how they think and how they feel, and we just don't really do that when we open the character like that either. They're like, yep, Kraven's a vigilante. Oh, okay. I guess. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course they kind of give him some reason, but also in that moment when the movie opens, he is the beam of light. He is the beam of light. And it's kind of hard to play both sides when you open as kind of the good guy. I don't like that he kind of opens as the good guy. I almost would have even liked if he started bad, similar to Penguin, right? Penguin opens, I'm like, this is not a good guy. We know it. He's not a good guy. I would have even liked it more if Kraven started off and we know he's not a good guy. But then he might do some things in terms of I care about my family that may feel a little bit like, okay, maybe I can sympathize with that. Maybe now we're teetering in something that's great, but a little bit more interesting, and then ends up doing something bad by the end anyway. That's something that's more interesting to me because now it's almost the opposite. We know what the darkness looks like. It's like, okay, now you're teetering in the light. And it just doesn't work always when I think you try to take shortcuts to get to those places and those characters. And I think, for Kraven, we just kind of open like, yeah, he's doing good. And yeah, I don't know if I rock with that.
Yeah, it's all confusing. And also, look, what I can't extrapolate from my mind and what I know about Craven is the fact and the idea that this character, for the majority of his history in any medium, hunts human beings for
Yes.
sport. That's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a good thing. That is a terrifying thing. If somebody who is ripped to shreds, swole as fuck, and has animalistic tributes is
Yep.
hunting humans, there's nothing inherently fun and good about that. That's a pretty
Exactly.
scary thought. And so
Yeah.
now you're asking me to root for that type of character and that type of guy, already a very tall task. And then you add on top of the fact that he is a foe for, one of the most beloved characters that we've seen in any form of fiction. It's just I just, there's some things that they can work if
Mhm.
done really really well, and you have some sort of ingenious idea. But I mean, by and large, what we've seen, they've just been orbiting and referencing and tiptoeing around Spider-Man for the sake of, hey, let's take somebody who probably has, in all honesty, like one good movie in them,
Mhm.
and that movie should be them being a villain, not a central character.
Exactly.
But now
Mhm.
we're trying to turn it into a trilogy, or something of that, and that's just like, that just feels very misguided. I think that
Mhm.
that's really what it boils down to. That just feels very misguided, and almost a bit of hubris on the part of Sony to think that they could really pull something like that off, even
Mhm.
for just one film, when largely the material doesn't support that type of story. And so I find it, again, just misguided. What do you think about just the physicality of Craven and what they do to him here? The character has an iconic look. We know him to have the
Yeah.
fur vest on, and the cheetah or leopard print and all of that stuff. And they spend most of the movie not really leaning into that iconography, like many other sort of superhero stories. He gets the big bad costume at the end, but you do get to
Mhm.
see a lot of that physicality in action: the running, the jumping, the animalistic tributes, the fighting, all of that stuff. What did you think about just those elements within the movie and Aaron Taylor Johnson, and just like, I guess, the physical shape he had to get into to really pull this off and perform at this level?
Yeah. Yeah, man, you could tell he definitely, was in shape and doing at least what he could on a from an action standpoint. A lot of those action scenes, again, those are the only times I was like, oh, I can I'm not like bored out of my like I don't want to just go walk out of this theater. Those were the moments I was like, okay, I can look at the screen and not be utterly upset, because there's a couple of okay and decent things in terms of action in this movie. I mean, he was biting people, he was chasing people down. I was like, okay, cool. This is some cool Craven stuff, I think, to see. And so I didn't mind some of that stuff in the movie. Again, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson did what he could. It was fun to see. Okay, this is the animal instincts that can come about from a Craven. I still think I was looking for something more scary. You kind of talked about it, like this dude. We should always be afraid that even the thought of this dude Craven is around here, and in some ways you kind of lose a little bit of that fear factor because he's the titular character and he has to be on screen. In some ways, I can imagine a world if this was Spider-Man was in this world, he'd be scarier because he's not on screen. Or you might hear something and be like, "Oh my god, what was that?" You know what I mean? That's what Craven is supposed to kind of be. And when we see it from that first or that first person point of view, it becomes a little less scary, and they did turn into an action film in that way. So it was like, this is cool to see. I'm still scared of this dude, right? He's running at you like a freaking lion or a cheetah or something. It's still scary, but I still miss, I think, some of those aspects of like, nah, man, this dude, hunters don't always just show themselves. They're like hiding in woods and stuff. And I wish we wasn't always like on some first point of view kind of type stuff when it came to Aaron Taylor Johnson's character.
It does appear that they try to, I'm saying this loosely because there's certainly sections of this movie where this is not true, but it seems like that they tried to really do as much as they could practically, especially with Aaron
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Johnson. It appeared that he probably performed a good amount of these stunts, and his face was always in camera.
Yeah.
And again, the shape that he got in was tremendous and phenomenal. He obviously put in a ton of work to physically embody what you would imagine the character to look like. And there were a couple of moments where it's like, oh wow, that's cool. You can see him being animalistic in urban environments even. A lot of this movie takes
Mm-hmm.
place in London, and to see him use that sort of canvas was also it was cool at a couple of points. And then another part of me was thinking like they could have even taken it further in some respects. Like there's moments that they could have gone even farther with this animalistic
Yeah.
identity that he upholds, because they do match his blood up with the lion's blood. And there might have been some interesting moments to see, like, just even more vicious stuff on screen. I know that
Mm-hmm.
this was rated R. This is their first rated R movie from Sony and Marvel, and there were times where they met that expectation and the criteria of a rated R movie. But you could have gone farther. You
Yeah.
definitely could have done more. We just are coming off of Deadpool and Wolverine. You look at the car fight in the middle of the woods. It's like that is extremely rated R stuff. Even the opening scene to the in sync stuff, that's extremely rated R stuff. There
Yeah.
were like maybe 2 or 3 moments in this movie where it's like, yep, y'all nailed it, but not really elsewhere. And it's not
Exactly.
that you have to do that. You don't have to always be gratuitous with it, but if you're gonna go for it, then I just really want you to go for it. And so I was also just expecting a little bit more on that front, because seeing the preview at New York Comic-Con, they kind of showed the best action scene, which was towards the end in the woods. Like,
Right.
that's what they showed. I thought like that's maybe like the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, in actuality, that was the big blow off,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and nothing really matched it beforehand. The car chase was okay, but it wasn't all that spectacular. Let's talk about Kraven's family. So we should talk about the two characters together. I think we can get into Russell Crowe's character, his father, Nikolai, and then also his brother, played by Fred Hetchinger, Dimitri, who's also technically the Chameleon. And I did not know that was something that they were going for in this movie. Maybe I missed it in the promotion. I don't know if this was like revealed beforehand. I didn't realize that they were going to have Chameleon in this movie. But essentially, these two were kind of the focal points for the Kraven character. Him and Dimitri are not close with their father. Kraven also, sort of abandons his brother, his younger brother at an early age. Again, just because of the dissension between him and his father. His father is a big drug lord, has a ton of money. Dimitri's kind of an outcast of the family, the black sheep of the family. He's smaller, he's skinny, frail, whereas Kraven is like big and hulking. And then you have just the overwhelming presence of Russell Crowe in the movie. So their relationship amongst each other is just in all sorts of different directions. And Kraven and Dimitri do have a bit of a close relationship when they are on screen together. But again, they've been separated for quite a while. And we do see Dimitri get kidnapped in the movie, and that kind of is the driving force for Kraven kind of in the second act to basically save his brother from kidnappers. But what did you think about just the development of the relationship between these three, throughout the movie, the performances, from Fred Hetchinger and Russell Crowe, and I guess kind of what they added to the backstory of who we knew Kraven to be throughout the story?
Yeah, Craven's family, it is interesting. Even in some of those Spider-Man 2, on PlayStation, there's a couple of moments where you are just rummaging through some files and things that Craven has, and you're like, man, this family's crazy. Like, what's wrong with these people? So I think it was interesting, at least a little bit, to see, okay, maybe what that dynamic is like. And comic book wise, that the Dimitri and Sergei stuff, the Kraven and Chameleon stuff is a little bit accurate. They were, supposed to be close. And in fact, I think it's Chameleon that even gets Kraven to hunt Spider-Man in the first place. So I thought I was also of the same mind, though, that I didn't know that that's what we were going for. I didn't know that they would actually even explore Chameleon in this film, though Chameleon is an important character. Yeah, it's just not something that I was like, oh, they're not going to do that. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, he's going to be a normal character. And so when I seen that they were going for the Chameleon stuff, I was like, whoa, okay, we should have. I don't know. There might have been another way to think about this film that might be able to service those characters a little bit better by way of Spider-Man. I'm like, there's a lot there actually, and they do a little bit, but again, of course, just simply not enough, and not to the strengths of what this movie is supposed to be. But performances, I like them all, man. I don't really have a lot of complaints. I think these are just good actors in bad movies. I think Russell Crowe did what he had to do. I like him and Dimitri's kind of uh weird relationship, with each other. They're it's so interesting how Dimitri just didn't want to be in this whole family thing. He didn't want. It's a very, of course, a storyline we've seen in her before, but the father's imposing, a different kind of pressure to do something else, with these people and to serve the family name. And again, some of that stuff could have been fine, but in maybe a different flick. But I think overall, yeah, a lot of that stuff just kind of fell short. But some of their performances with each other while they're on screen together, it was some of the better parts of the movie. It's just like, oh man, that was cool. And then as soon as you leave them, it's like, dang, that could have been something great, but it's just not going to be, because what is even this story? You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, that was a good performance, but what did it matter? And it usually didn't matter. But yeah, I enjoyed them for what they could do, at least on screen together.
I think I would have enjoyed this movie slightly more, like
Mm-hmm.
0.2 points more, if
Mm-hmm.
they played all of this family stuff as a comedy. Because I actually
Mm.
think that this could have been like just hilarious, goofy shit.
Yeah.
Especially like Russell Crowe's accent in this film, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what he's doing here, he's kind of hamming it up at a few points. And even Fred Hetchinger, especially considering what we just saw him do in Gladiator 2,
Mm-hmm.
knowing how unhinged he can really be, and he kind of tries to get to that level, but doesn't really reach those heights. He's also absent for a lot of the film once he gets kidnapped. I just feel like if they just like went for full goofy comedy,
Mm-hmm.
sort of comedic shtick between the relationship between these three, I might have just enjoyed it a little bit more. I just really didn't take it serious at all, and
Yeah.
it all felt just somewhat flimsy to me. It just felt really,
Mm-hmm.
really flimsy in terms of a story. Seeing them on screen together, there is some chemistry amongst the three. Like there definitely is chemistry there where you can see like why that this is something and why it could probably work in better circumstances with a better script. But
Mm-hmm.
it just, it's one of those things where I don't know. I think if we were in like Succession territory with the type of writing, if we can really lean into something like that, of course, this is just not, it's nowhere near that
Yeah.
type of level. But that idea, within the context of
Mm-hmm.
like what they're doing here, could have been
Exactly.
interesting because we are talking about, very wealthy family, succession plans, who's next, who's going to lead. There's those ideas there, dissension between siblings, like all of that stuff is kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And Succession is obviously a dark comedy, and it just never gets to those levels, obviously. Now, what did you think about the look of Chameleon? Because we actually do get a glimpse of like what he actually looks like. There's several moments where we get the impersonation of him, acting like certain characters and mimicking certain characters. He mimics his father a lot. He mimics other characters. So they hint at it all throughout the movie. And then at the end of the movie, he decides like, I'm going to be the big bad villain now. I'm not going to let any of this stand. And we actually get a quick glimpse of what this version of Chameleon looks like, which, to say the least, looks extremely different than I think what we're used to. But what did you think of that big reveal towards the end of the film?
Man, I was just like, okay. I guess I honestly like didn't really care by the time it came around. And I think again, it was, in a lot of ways, it was just so annoying and frustrating for me because I knew like, dang, we're never gonna see the light of the light of day with this character on the other with Spider-Man. I think that was it. I was like, Chameleon is actually pretty decent of a character, and again, important a little bit in the Kraven storyline of that villain too. And so when I seen him, the look of him was just like, I guess, man, like if that's the best y'all could do, or I don't know what we're doing here, or why we're doing it here. But yeah, he looked crazy. He looked crazy. He looked like Voldemort. And the thing is, Chameleon is supposed to look pretty crazy.
Oh man,
but not like that, man. He's it just looks silly. And again, I think a lot of it is context and the way the movie felt up until that point. And then by the time you see it, you're like, oh brother. And I just rolled my eyes and was just like, okay, what are we doing here? But yeah, it didn't look all that great to me, to say the least.
it looked extremely unfinished. That's what it looked like to me. It's like
Yeah.
this probably didn't have a ton of time to sit into the oven and just kind of
Yeah.
let it stew and let it bake.
It should have been practical.
It probably should have been, because they
Should have been
definitely go
practical.
for sort of a CGI blend here, and it looks very crazy. I didn't think of Voldemort, but that's good. Kraven, come to me. It was just like weird, by that point in the movie. After getting like many moments of bad CGI, which we're gonna get into shortly here. Let's talk about
Oh
Ariana
brother.
DeBose.
Oh brother.
Ariana DeBose, who plays Calypso. You've alluded to her already. In the comics, Calypso does have ties to Kraven, does have ties to
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man. Makes
Mm-hmm.
sense as to why the character is present and you would want to include her in the story. And she's most known as like a voodoo priestess,
Yes.
and her origins come from Haiti, and she also was a part of the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline that I talked a little bit
Hmm.
about earlier. There's a lot, to the Calypso character, and we knew that she was going to be in the movie. I think even at one point in time, it was going to be played by Jodie Turner-Smith instead of
Mm.
Ariana DeBose, which, from a physicality standpoint, is more accurate than Ariana
Yeah,
DeBose. Don't
for
know
sure.
what happened there. Probably some scheduling stuff, but be that as it may, this character, does get introduced into the movie during the flashbacks as a young girl, and then of course we see her older, sort of reconnect with Kraven after Kraven finds her. As they're sort of tracking down Rhino and Kraven's brother Dimitri, all sorts of stuff that happens there. But yeah, there are many choices that are made on the part of Ariana DeBose and the performance in this film that we have to get into. But what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts on her performance and what she brought to the movie, on top of what you said earlier about, sort of the contributions and how she really kind of exists to move the plot along? But I guess also just the implementation of Calypso throughout the film, because I don't know how much of Calypso like powers and abilities we really saw here. Seems a little bit wasted to say the least. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Ariana DeBose in this movie?
Man, oof, I don't even know where to start. Ariana DeBose, fantastic actress, Academy Award winning. I don't know what movie she was in. I don't know if she knew what movie she was in. I don't even know if Calypso. Why? Also, by the end of it, I was just like, why Calypso? Like, almost in my mind, I was like, you could have made like just a different character. And I get it. Like, this is the Kraven thing. Like you said, Calypso is really important in that storyline. Shoot, Calypso helps drive Kraven crazy when Kraven's hunting Spider-Man. Like, she is supposed to serve as somewhat another antagonist to what Kraven has going on as well. Calypso is supposed to be like this chaotic woman who's kind of doing her own thing for a lot of different selfish reasons, and she uses potions and Loki. She can bring people back from the dead, which we kind of seen here, and there's some mind control things with here. And instead of all of that cool voodoo priestess African shit that Calypso exists, we got a lawyer. Oh my god, I could not believe they turned her into a lawyer. And maybe that's my lack of comic book knowledge. Maybe there's something there that I don't know about, but that's just not where I thought we would go, especially after seeing the origin. Like, at least the origins, I didn't like it too much, but I was like, okay, maybe they'll do something later on. Maybe we'll get to some really cool Calypso shit. And we turns out she's a lawyer. And that, like, I don't know. I can't even really imagine where they thought this was like a good character, like written down on paper. What are her motivations? Why is she here? Like, I don't even feel like they went through all of that stuff. I really do feel like she was put here to say, man, Kraven can't always move the plot by himself. We need somebody to help him move the plot. And they put this character in here in Calypso. And so it's weird to me because there is source material for this character. But maybe it's too hard without Spider-Man. It's another example of like maybe they just can't do it without Spider-Man. Because Calypso is interesting and she is her own thing. And so yeah, I don't know what we're going for. I don't know why we chose Ariana DeBose. I just don't. None of it was just really working for me at all. She was also a victim. I didn't talk about this with Fred Herchinger. Man, I cannot say his name. With Fred Herchinger as Dimitri. But there's a lot of bad ADR in this thing, and she had a lot of bad ADR, and he had a lot of bad ADR. And I was like, y'all telling me y'all watched that back and didn't see none of that? I just can't even. Some of these edits just shouldn't have made it through. And anytime she was on the screen, it was weird because when I first seen it, I was a little excited. I was like, oh, Ariana DeBose, cool. She's about to do something. And then it just wasn't good. So yeah, she was disappointing to say the least. Calypso is supposed to be cool, but she also supposed to be super scary and all of these things. And she wasn't any of those things that I expected her to be.
Oh man, this is gonna suck. Um, I like Ariana DeBose a lot. I like her a
Yep.
lot. She's probably the worst part of this movie. You remember Tahir Rahim in Madam Web, Ezekiel Sims, the
Mm-hmm.
villain, and just
Yep.
how bad, like inexplicably bad he was in that movie. That's what happened with her in this movie. It's almost the same exact treatment. There's so many baffling things here. All the line delivery is extremely stiff, no personality, no character behind it at all. It is mostly exposition dumps to move the plot along. The ADR truly is atrocious and almost amateur-like. In fact, there are so many moments in this movie where you're hearing Ariana DeBose's voice and she's not even on camera, or you don't see her and her face on camera. There's a pulled away shot. She is shot from behind or she's shot from the side, in which you can't really make out the words that are coming out of her mouth, likely because she had to re-record, I would say, the majority of her lines. In fact, I would wager that at least 80% of this performance and the lines that she delivered are not actually delivered in any of the scenes that they shot. Most of it was probably re-recorded in the fucking booth months later. Yeah. I just really, if you haven't seen the movie or if you go back to watch the movie, just pay attention to every single scene and look at how many times her face is actually on camera and her mouth is moving and the words actually match. Even more so, I noticed this, I don't know how many other people noticed this, there were multiple times in the movie where her mouth was digitally manipulated and a different mouth performance was given, and I don't know what the fuck that was about. I've never seen that. Like, I guess they brought her back in and filmed her and digitally inserted the new line delivery on top of her face. It looked like fucking I don't even know what's that show where you can, it's SpongeBob when they have the animated characters and the real mouth on top of the fucking animated drawings. That's what it looked like to me. I was like, what is going on? It was so distracting. And it doesn't help that all of that stuff you mentioned about the character itself and the backstory and the stuff that they don't really lean into, and just her ineffectiveness and her lack of importance to the plot just adds on top of everything that we're saying here. And I was just really, really, really perplexed at the whole thing. It bothered me so much. And she's so talented, but she's just utterly wasted here. So I don't know what the miscommunication was, but it feels like that everything around her character and her inclusion in the movie was dramatically rewritten and redone in post. Like almost every single thing. I don't know what they salvaged from her actual original performance outside of like the shots themselves, but whatever B-roll that they had, whatever additional shots that they got, they fucking exhausted that stuff, because literally you never see her deliver any of her lines. And it's just crazy to me that a big Hollywood studio is producing their film in that way, and it's getting to this level, and it's allowed to be seen by us. It almost feels like I shouldn't be seeing this. It feels like an assembly cut. I was just really I just couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. It's as bad as what we saw in Madam Web earlier this year. I just want to just quickly, because I'm concerned. I'm concerned about Ariana DeBose.
Yeah.
Academy Award winning actress. Quite possibly the best part of West Side Story, Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. She is electric in that movie. Since then, she's been in ISS, terrible movie. She's been in Disney's Wish, one of their worst animated feature films of all time, no doubt about it. Argyle, that came out last year, and now Kraven the Hunter. And I haven't heard good things about some of these other things. House of Spoils. I haven't heard great things about that either. I haven't watched, but what the fuck is going on? I just don't, and I'm not blaming her. I don't want anybody to get that twisted. You know, things happen. There could be all sorts of reasons as to what's happening here. I'm sure that, you know, money might be involved. I mean, everybody got to get paid. You know, everybody needs money to support themselves and families, but this is not the trajectory I expected for somebody coming off of an Academy Award win, especially at her young age. She is such a young, talented actress. There's obviously still a ton of time to turn things around and just, you know, hopefully pick better roles and be a part of better projects. But in these 3 short years, everything that I've seen her in post West Side Story, I'm like, girl, what are you doing? This is bothering me. You should have a really, really promising career. You should be on the level of what we're seeing out of I don't know, Timothy Chalamet or Florence Pugh or, you know, any of these people. Like, what, I don't know, what are your thoughts on just like everything that's happened post West Side Story with her?
Yeah, I don't know, man. You know, we have seen glimpses of when people shoot too fast to the top in some ways, right? Like what that, I don't even know if come down is the word, but the next, it's almost like it's almost like, you know, in hip hop there's always like the sophomore album curse or whatever it is. It's almost like she's going through that, kind of like her freshman, that's West Side Story, and now she's kind of having like that sophomore slump thing kind of going on, where we're trying to figure out what is going on with again, you don't want to blame her, but it's like the projects that you're picking. Again, I've been talking, I feel like I've been talking about this a lot, but it's always like these agents and these people, like, and you have to say yes to these things. Like you said, some people need money, but I don't know, it seems like people have a hard time kind of figuring it out sometimes after they do. Everybody hasn't done the Timothy Chalamet or like the Zendaya, you know what I mean? Everybody hasn't had that kind of run. In some ways, they've had the opposite, and that's what this kind of feels like. Ariana Grande has kind of had the opposite run. Even this isn't even a movie, but like, remember the whole rap thing she did at the BAFTAs last year?
Not a great look.
Did not go well, and so I don't know what it is. It's something that happens though when you get shot to the stars, and now the expectation is so high that I don't know, man. People start saying yes to projects, and maybe they think they can make them good. I don't know. They don't read the scripts how they should. I don't know how it all works, but it's just she's in one of those slumps right now. It has to be, you know, some other people that you know, we would claim to be stars and award winning. It just happens way too often. It happened to Halle Berry, you know. I don't know, it just happens, and I think she's just in kind of a victim of one of those same slumps. I can't put a name to it.
Yeah, it's just, it's disappointing. It's disappointing because, again, you know, you see somebody that gets shot to the moon that way. They get the rocket strapped to their back, and post a moment of that nature, of that stature, you're just like, okay, you know, we're here. We're ready to witness the continued ascent of this star. I mean, even other people who have not won Academy Awards but have been nominated. You know, we've seen what's
Yeah,
happened with Austin Butler post Elvis,
yeah.
and just like what he's been able to do. And
Mhm.
even taking the Academy Award out of it, like Sydney Sweeney,
Mhm.
who was also in a terrible Sony Marvel movie, has still managed to pick some really
Yeah.
interesting stuff to do, you
Mhm.
know? And
Yes.
she's managed, and she's admitted, you know, previously in interviews, like, yeah, I've been broke for a long time and I'm still not
Mhm.
making money and I'm still just kind of like figuring it out. But she's managed to like strike a balance, and I'm sure she's starting to make a lot more money now while also still being a part of like interesting projects to where we can like see like, oh, she is talented. She's not just something
Right.
to, you know, she's
Exactly.
much more than just, you know, being a beautiful woman. Like she's
Mhm.
clearly talented and capable. And again, Ariana DeBose, man, I'm just, you know, I just wanted hopefully to turn around, you know, within the next couple of years, and to just see more out of her, because we obviously know she's capable of more. We've seen it, but
Right.
so far the material is not, it's not presented that opportunity to her. Let's keep moving. Alessandro Nivola as Alexei Sistevich, aka the Rhino. He's the primary villain of the film, I guess I would say. I mean, he's one of the antagonists. He's one of like three antagonists. I guess we can say Nikolai, you know, Sergei and Dimitri's father. He's kind of an antagonist.
Mhm.
We get the foreigner in this movie. You know, we'll get to him
Yeah.
in a quick second. He's an antagonist, but I guess Rhino was kind of like the big one. You know, and we found out about Rhino being in this movie earlier this year, I think with the first trailer that dropped around, I believe it was February.
Mhm.
I didn't know what role Rhino would play in this film. I didn't know if it was just going to be a quick like pop in, like just
Yeah.
a formidable physical foe. And in fact, the fact, you know, that Rhino is kind of the main villain, this Russian mercenary, was a bit of a surprise as well, that I didn't necessarily expect. And now Alessandro Nivola, he's another actor I like, but Rhino, for lack of a better term, is a tough character to pull off, as we historically know. They
Yep.
tried to introduce Rhino briefly in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, played by Paul Giamatti, and didn't work. Just didn't work out. You think you can take on Alexis? You know, it just didn't work. It was bad CGI. It was goofy. It was just too goofy.
Yeah.
After watching this movie, I'm like, I think I can kind of go back to Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I think I would rather probably have the mech suit instead of what we got
Yeah.
here. But
Sure.
talk about your takeaways with the performance, and then I mean, really, I think the most important aspect is like the look of Rhino. Like ultimately, what did you think of just how they brought Rhino to life, in particular in the third act of the film?
Man, oh man. I don't even know where to start with this dude. I can start with I guess the performance for Alessandro Nivola here, which it was a different take. We haven't gotten a lot of we usually in live action we've only really seen Rhino like in the suit. You know what I mean? Like we haven't really seen Rhino. Even I think the beginning. I think it's Miles Morales is where you fight Rhino, like in that PS4, PS5 game. Even then, you kind of already get Rhino in the suit. You don't get him outside of the suit. So I think it was just interesting to see, like, okay, what does Rhino even mean outside of the suit? How did he? Honestly, don't know much about Rhino. It's like one of the villains. I'm like, I don't know much about you, bro. I just know kind of who you are when you show up in this big Rhino suit. And I think I think he was trying to do something interesting, but it just turned out to be weird by the end of it all, to say the least. It was actually, just looking at it, I was like, I don't know if this is what I thought that Rhino was going to be at all. Especially like you said, we got Paul Giamatti and was getting these other iterations of Rhino. If I dial all that back, this is not what I thought that character was going to be at all. It's something completely different. He's like super nerdy and quirky, and he has like these weird obsession. I don't know. It's just it's not what I was looking at. Like he wore glasses. I was like, wait, Rhino would wear glasses outside of this thing? Are we going back to Jamie Foxx as Electro? Like, why you have these glasses on? I don't know. I just didn't expect it. And by the time we do get the transformation as Rhino, I was like, this sucks. Damn, this looks so bad. Holy shenanigans. I think given the trailer, I was interested in like, okay, I get it. There's all kind of serums and things that we have been introduced in all of these superhero films. Maybe let's see what happens when we don't try the suit. We got to go back to the suit because the serum ain't it. The serum is not it. Again, I was interested in it, what it would look like. It doesn't look good. The CGI doesn't look good. I don't like the design. The horn looks weird. He looks like I don't know, just like some kind of golem with horns, man, like a devil. He looks like a demon. Actually, if somebody showed me a picture and was like, you know what, this dude is in like a live action anime film, I would believe it. I don't think he's Rhino from Spider-Man, though. That doesn't give me that. And I think that's a problem when I'm like, who is this dude? Is he really the Rhino? He doesn't look like, to me, how he's supposed to look. So it looks super silly. He's running head forward with this, again, supposed to be live. I don't know. It just all looked very bad. They did try some things practically, just because it's practical don't mean it look good. It didn't look that great. So yeah, man, I think this was a small part. I will say is a small welcome experiment. It just went bad. It just didn't work out, and that's fine.
How sad, man. How sad. This shit was so terrible. I mean, we waited the whole movie to see it, and the final product of it all was, well, that certainly was anticlimactic and not worth the fucking wait. Because they tease it the entire movie. What they introduce with the character is the idea that the serum that's, sort of attached to this book bag that he's wearing, and he has an IV that if he sticks within his skin, like he'll turn to stone and eventually transforms the Rhino. And they tease it numerous times where he'll show what the appearance looks like, but then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, never mind. It's too painful, is his reasoning for not transforming into the Rhino, which just seems so bitch made to me. Like, become the Rhino and don't deal with it anymore. Like, what are you talking about? It's too painful.
Right.
And so, you get brief glimpses of it, and it's like, all right, we are going fully CGI route here, and just more of a, I guess, a realistic interpretation of a Rhino and not doing the suit. And then the big reveal at the end looks so bad. It's just so terrible. It's like bad CGI on top of bad CGI. Like the environment in and of itself that they're in at the end of the movie is not real. You can tell that it's like a sound stage and completely backed by, likely a green screen or blue screen backdrop. And then the CGI of the creature of the Rhino, it's the most unintimidating shit you've seen. First of all, he's not big enough. They don't make him big enough. Like, he should be way bigger
Huge.
than how they present him in this movie. I was just like, why is he still small? He's like, okay, he went from being like a 5'7" guy to now being like a 6'2" Rhino. No, this motherfucker should be like 11 feet tall. Huge, right? And then for whatever reason, once he transforms into the Rhino, he's still wearing slacks and dress shoes, which I was just like, what the fuck? Why does he still have human clothes on? It just didn't make sense to me. It just felt odd and strange. When we see the Hulk transform in the MCU, he's obviously developed those, sort of elastic shorts, the pants that can match, the growth of the transformation. And that makes sense. That's a scientific sort of explanation and invention for having something to obscure his, his nether regions down there, covering it up. So I'm not against that and something being down there, but fucking Gap slacks on Rhino, and he's fighting in the middle of a African savannah. I'm just like, what's going on here?
Got the belt still on.
The belt was on. The shoes were on. Didn't pop. The only thing that popped was the damn dress shirt, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, the shirt should pop. What about the pants? Them pants would rip in a fucking second. And so they kept his legs small on top of this huge, like, hulking torso. So he never does leg day. So I'm just like, this is all just looking terrible. It just looks so bad. The face in particular, when they start to get the close-ups of the face, because they tried it looks like they tried to do some motion capture with Alessandro Nivola, which, I think that's kind of the way to go these days. We see it a lot, but it just didn't work. It just doesn't translate on top of what they were doing. So yeah, no, this wasn't it. What's really good about the Spider-Man PlayStation games is they kind of blend both. It is the suit, but the guy underneath the suit is fucking massive. He's a huge hulking figure. And so
almost juggernautish,
exactly. Like, just a bigger guy, like a juggernaut, and then they put the more mechanized suit on top of him. So it just feels like a good blend. And so, I agree. They probably had to go this way, considering that the suit did not work in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but somebody's gonna have to pull off Rhino one of these days, because so far we've just not gotten the goods with them, unfortunately. Christopher Abbott is in this movie as the Foreigner. We're going to see him again soon in the Wolfman movie, which looks fun. But Christopher Abbott, I mean, he's always doing interesting roles. Again, another actor I like. I like everybody in this movie. He's playing Foreigner in this movie. He's an assassin that basically works on behalf of Rhino. I don't personally have a ton to say just about his performance, because he also shows up like very late in the movie and becomes a late stage villain in terms of the story. My big question though is, what were his powers? I was so confused by what this guy could do. They never really explained it, and he does it like 3 or 4 times in the movie. Like, he exhibits and showcases like what his power set is, and I never got it. It never clicked for me. And to my knowledge, I could be wrong about this, and maybe there's other interpretations of the character, but from what I know, the Foreigner in the comics doesn't have like enhanced supernatural abilities. Like, he's an assassin, so he can fight, he can obviously, do some forms of martial arts, likely stuff like that, like a Deathstroke. But what he's doing in this movie is like freezing and stopping time and moving through time and manipulating time. I don't know, but it just felt super unclear to me. I don't know what it was, but I don't know if you picked up on it or if you got a better understanding of what he was actually capable of throughout the story.
Yeah, I think my interpretation was he gets to freeze and then choose how the people experience time, but that's it. Like, like I could barely understand it myself, but that's, I think, how I came to understand it by the end of it. I guess I don't know why they decided every character needed powers here. Like you said, the Foreigner is, like you said, just kind of like an assassin, right? Very, very, very covert. I got a gun type dude. That's what I thought who the Foreigner was supposed to be. I'm like, oh, now you have time powers, and instead of just keeping him grounded they decided, you know what, we put him in the movie, let's give him powers. Everybody else got powers. Let's give him some powers as well. And it's I think those powers could be interesting in a different movie or in a different explanation or something, but it just doesn't work here, and it doesn't make any sense here. And why did they even put it on the foreigner at all? I don't know. Just like give it to somebody else. Part of me feels like once you start like compromising that character, just rename them. It doesn't have to be the foreigner anymore. It's okay to like sometimes not have that comic book tie. And it feels like they felt like they had to have that. Either like pick one, either go with the powers or go with the comic book way. And instead they continue to try to mix these things, and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work at all. It truly does not. And it's the waste of another, talented actor who's been in
Man.
interesting stuff, man.
Yeah.
He's done good work. He also showed up very late in Poor Things and was incredible, when he shows up, and he's a villain in that movie. And it's like, oh yeah, this guy is good at what he does here. And they try to make him intimidating, with these powers, but it just didn't land for me, because I was more confused than anything. Anytime he you utilize his powers, and he did the same thing every time, which bothered me as well. Like there was no variety and nothing interesting about his powers. He would just freeze time and then go behind somebody and just kill them. That's the extent of what you've done. So it just shows to me like you haven't really practiced much with these. You don't really know exactly what you can do. All you know how to do is get a one up on people and take them out, and that's just like that's not
OP.
interesting. Also,
pretty
that
OP.
Yeah,
like, why can you do that?
Why do you have that power in particular? And that makes that should make you really kind of, almost unbeatable in a lot of respects, But just a whack introduction of a character, and just like terrible usage of him here. I didn't rock with it at all. Those are all the main characters. I guess as we start to wrap up here, because there really isn't a ton more to say about the film itself, we should transition to closing thoughts. But as we get to closing thoughts, just like what's happening here with Sony, Marvel, the spin-off films that they've been producing.
Mm-hmm.
We hinted at this earlier, and you did bring up the point that you feel thankful that this is dead. And about a week ago, it did appear that it probably was likely maybe dead, and perhaps it still is. There was a report that was published by The Wrap about a few, I think 4 or 5 days before the movie came out, that it essentially said that the Sony Spider-Man universe of these spin-off films is no longer going to be moving forward, just considering the really, really poor performance of this movie and the other films. And this movie hadn't even come out yet, but all the tracking had pointed to it was going to be a really, really low opening and just super unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. And essentially that Wrap article alluded to the fact that Sony, as the proprietors of the Spider-Man license, they will be pouring their focus into 3 upcoming projects. Those 3 projects are the next Spider-Man film featuring Tom Holland, Beyond the Spider-Verse, which is going to conclude the animated feature films of the Miles Morales character, and last but not least, the Spider-Man Noir series that they've been filming featuring Nicolas Cage that'll debut on Prime Video in the near future. Outside of that, there are no current plans for any other stories. A few days later, Variety did publish an article that kind of essentially debunked that idea, and they essentially said within that article that yes, those 3 movies are the big focal point on the horizon, and that's what Sony will be pouring a lot of their attention and time into. However, they did make note of the fact that, look, in the midst of all of this, Sony and even others, likely filmmakers that have been attached to this universe, they staunchly defend the performance of the Venom feature films, which have, from a financial standpoint, they have been successful. Collectively, they've grossed $1.8 billion worldwide. It's nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money. And even these other movies that have not been successful, one thing that Sony can say that a lot of other studios can't say, in particular Disney, is that they produce these movies relatively cheaper compared to some of the other superhero outings that we see. A lot of these films don't cost in excess of $120 to $150 million. The most expensive films have been Venom, and I think that even The Last Dance cost $120. We see Disney all the time spending upwards of $200, $250, million on these movies. And so the upside, it's a lot harder to achieve financial success when they cost so much. But Sony has been, I guess, relatively responsible with their budgets, even with the low box office performance. But essentially, the reality is that in order for Sony to maintain this license of Spider-Man, they have to make movies. Otherwise, they'll lose the license, and they have to make movies at a pretty steady clip. They have to put things out relatively quickly. They can't just sit around. And so, hey, perhaps the next, 3 or 4 years, we only get those 3 projects. Perhaps we only get Tom Holland Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, and Beyond the Spider-Verse. What comes next? Do we just continue with Tom Holland? Do we get live action Miles Morales? Do they go back to the well with spin-off characters? There's a lot of conversations that are going to have to be had, that I'm sure are being had right now, about how to continue and whether or not this particular side of the universe is dead. And if that's even what they're going after. I think we also have to ask that question. Like, are they even going after an interconnected universe? Is there an end game to this? There might not be. There might not be a Sinister Six movie that unites them and that Spider-Man go. I mean, I don't know. But I think it's probably safe to say that we won't see anything in the immediate future from spin-off characters. But I don't know if I'm quite ready to say that it's quote unquote dead. I kind of want it to be, but just reality sets in where it's like, yeah, this is a studio that needs to make money. This is really their biggest IP. They don't have a ton of other IP like Disney does, right? And so they ultimately have to figure out a way to spin this off in ways to make money in the future. So let's just start there. Sort of your immediate thoughts and takeaways on, obviously, the failures that we've dealt with over the past number of years. Is there a way to turn this around? What do you just see potentially as the future, or lack thereof, for, I guess, spin-off Spider-Man films that may come in the near future?
Yeah, I think, starting off, I think Sony, when they conceptualize Venom as a film in the interest of that first Venom, I think it makes sense, right? It's like Spider-Man's biggest villain that we have, and it's also so interesting because Venom does kind of sit with Joker in terms of like, oh, people would be interested in those. You know what I mean? Like, oh, a Venom solo movie, Joker, so people would actually pull up to those movies because those are villains that have, I think, existed in a very just a very popular manner. People love those people. I've seen before Venom the movie even comes out, huge character, people love him. And so I'm like, okay, I see why that movie was made. I see why I made a ton of money, all of those things. And I think it's so weird because I don't think I understand why Sony thought it was going to happen with other characters outside of Venom and somebody that big. And we've talked about this before. I think the only way moving forward for them not to make a movie and lose money, right? Again, Kraven did terrible. Like, it's going to lose. It's losing money. I think the only way forward is to include some sort of Spider-Man. That's the only way. It doesn't have to be Tom Holland. Include a Spider-Man. Go get Andrew Garfield back. Go pick up a Gwen of your own or something. You know what I'm saying? Go pick up a Cindy Moon. Find a spider person. It can be Jessica. I don't care who it is. Find a spider person and make those movies. People will be more interested in that. There are a lot of spiders, what we have seen, that we have not gotten a lot of those stories. People barely knew who Madam Web was. You telling me you'd rather make a Madam Web film than to have one of these spiders included in one of your stories, especially given the heightened interest in spiders post Across the Spider-Verse, where everyone's like, oh my God, who's Spider-Bait? Oh my God, who's Spider-Punk? Who are these spiders? People are interested in these characters. I see nothing but cosplays, costumes from Halloween, all of these things. I ain't seen not a one Madam Web this year. You know what I'm saying? Because people aren't interested in that. They are interested in spiders though, and people love spider people. And I think if they want to make movies moving forward and that people are interested in, you can't keep going with these C-list, D-list Spider-Man villains. If you want to change it up, that's the only way to go. It doesn't have to be Tom Holland. It don't have to be Andrew Garfield or damn near. You know what I'm saying? It just needs to be a new Spider. And I think that's the best way forward if they decide to go forward. My issue is I have no trust in Sony in this side of the universe. They have not done anything to me in a live action standpoint to what makes me feel good as a fan of like, yeah, Sony, maybe you should try this thing. They've just lost my trust. I can't I can't say, yeah, I'm excited if they, even if they do come out and say, yeah, I'm going to make this spider thing, unless Marvel, the MCU is heavily involved. I'm like, ooh, I don't know how that's going to go, but I do think that's the right direction moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about just the lack of trust. Yeah, even the examples of the projects that have worked, which are the animated Spider-Verse films that look, that's a lot of Lord Miller, really sort of ruling over that side of things and having huge creative influence on that character and that story.
Mhm.
Tom Holland and his films, a lot of that is Marvel Studios. That's why they struck up the
Exactly.
agreement to begin with, because they have been able to showcase successfully what that character can do within that universe, and then also with his own separate standalone stories. And Sony has yet to exhibit that, despite the success of Venom. Nobody is walking outside saying like, yeah, Venom is the Citizen Kane of superhero movies. That's not happening,
Right.
because you can have a very, very lengthy, worthwhile argument that these are not good movies either. They just so happen to be successful because of the popularity of the character. And again, staunchly will say it is also just due to the time in which it came out. If Venom 1 comes out today, I don't think it works at all. But the fact that it came out in 2018 at the height of superhero cinema and popularity,
Right.
and it was like at least entertaining, and you have a
Yeah.
pretty well-known star in Tom Hardy, like you have enough ingredients to get people to go to see it. But they just have not exhibited that they know how to make movies, period. Just the filmmaking ability is just like
Exactly.
in so much question. And I know Avi Arad is behind a lot of this stuff, and he's been associated with Marvel for such a long time. And I just think that if there will be more, in particular with spin-off characters, first and foremost, I agree with what you said. We need some sort of Spider-Man character included.
It's a spider.
Like, it's also weird because there was another report that came out that confirmed that Sony is essentially chosen to not include Spider-Man characters in this movie. It's not that they can't. It's not that they can't do it, because of like what they have with Tom Holland and the MCU. They've just chosen not to because they thought that they could build movies around these characters, and that's just proven not to be true. So they need to do that, but they need to get, if they're going to continue this, they need to get some creative visionary or some creative force who can spearhead this and map this out. And it does not have to be some wild, epic, huge crossover cinematic universe. I'm not asking for that, but what I am asking for is a consistent voice, a consistent presence, a consistent vision, where you can at least look to somebody behind the making of these movies and the expansion of these characters and say, they're taking care of this because this is probably all that they're doing. And right now, the people that are doing that are not doing a good job. And I look, let's remove superheroes. I'm looking even at a different, universe, like John Wick, for example.
Right.
And what Chad Stahelski is doing over there, and how much control and influence and care he's putting into that. They damn near reshot all of Ballerina because they got the dailies, they got the footage and said, this ain't it. Like, we got to do this right. This has to be a good movie because people go and expect to see really, really good John Wick movies. Like, you need that type of iron fist and that type of control to say, whatever it costs, whatever it takes, we're going to get it right. And it may not always work, and sometimes it just won't work. But you at least try, you at least know that the effort was there. I think we can say the same thing about a lot of Marvel Studios projects. There's been a lot of reshoots and stuff that's done over. At least they're trying, it just feels like that they're not trying here. And that they just kind of put anything out just for the sake and hope that maybe it'll hit, maybe it'll work. And it just has not. It has not at all. And so it's really unfortunate to see it go down this way and to just be on this wave of just terrible movie after terrible movie. And the last thing that I'll just quickly say, I forgot to say it at the top. I cannot believe that this movie is now on J.C. Chandor's resume. Like, this is a director that I really, really like. Margin Call is an incredible movie. Triple Frontier came out a few years ago. I think it's one of the most underrated action movies that's come out. Most Violent Year is an incredible movie. Like, this guy is a really, really, really good director, and like one of the most promising directors that we have. And I was excited that he was behind this, but the fact that like he's attached to this now, I'm like, fuck. I hate that for him. Hopefully he can go back and do something more interesting in the future. And likely he will. We do see a lot of directors tend to bounce back with more interesting subject matter, but I just hate that this is kind of a stain on almost a stainless track record so far for him. But that's how it shakes out sometimes. Last question I'll ask you: where does this rank for you amongst the movies we've got? Do you think it's better or worse than Madam Web? Better or worse than Morbius? Does it supplant any of the Venom films? Where would you rank it amongst everything we've seen out of Sony Marvel so far?
It's the if I'm starting at the bottom, it's one up. It's the second from the worst to me. I think the worst personally is still Morbius. I still think it's oh my god, I think that movie is so atrocious. And but I ain't gonna lie, Madam Web, as terrible as it is, it's watchable. I'm like, at least I can laugh at this thing. You know what I mean? Like Madam Web, I'm like, okay, at least that's funny. And that is terrible. It's like it almost fits kind of the way Catwoman. It's like, dang, why is this movie not good? But I'm laughing the whole time. Kraven the Hunter and Morbius, I don't think I laughed not a one time because of how bad it was. It's just like, whoa. In Madam Web, almost in a little bit, Dakota Johnson low-key had she kind of low-key knew what movie she was in. Like she was silly as hell in that film.
And nobody here did. Nobody knew what fucking they were filming with
they
Kraven.
didn't know what the hell movie they was in. It just it makes for a straight face when you're watching it. And so yeah, and for that reason it belongs down there with Morbius. Didn't crack a smile. Just upset at the things that were happening. One thing I didn't talk about, oh my god, that pissed me off so bad in Kraven the Hunter, was the last shot. They had the audacity to put Aaron Taylor Johnson in Kraven in the iconic chair, trying to make it look like the Kraven on the throne. And I was like, no, y'all did not do that. It was so cheesy. It's so corny.
It was like a desk chair. It wasn't even like a throne. It was just like a fucking rolling chair in an office space.
And they sat on it so long. I was like, what is he doing? He was trying to get his posture right in the chair. And I was like, I think there was a way that could have, it was really comic booky. And part of me even likes the idea, but the execution was so bad. It just made me upset. Like, dang, that's what this has come to. We did this whole movie to get to this one scene is almost what it felt like. Like, this is what y'all wanted, was the iconic Kraven chair. But yeah, that was annoying. But yeah, it's at the bottom. Only thing below it right now is Morbius. I think the Venom films are more entertaining. They actually have fun with what they're doing in the Venom movies. They know what movies they're making, at least with the Venom movies. Kraven didn't know what the hell was going on, but I will say it's a ever slightly 0.5 points better than Morbius.
They did the same thing in Black Adam. The whole movie basically got to that end shot of him also sitting on a throne. That same sort of iconic look. They did the same thing. Just very cliched. We've seen this shit before. There's also, you reminded me of this. There's that shot in the trailer of Kraven wearing the vest and the whole outfit, and he has a spear and he's in the cave. That was never in the movie. I don't know if you know that shot, but it's typically the end hero shot of every trailer that they've put out so far, of him lighting the spear on fire, and unearthing whatever's in this big cave or lair. And I guess it was a different ending to just, or maybe it was added on stuff that would have happened after this throne shot that they decided to cut out for whatever reason. But that shot I remember was in pretty much every trailer, and it's nowhere to be found in the movie for whatever reason. So save it. More footage of Kraven? I don't think so. I don't think I need that. I think I'm good. But I guess, I was really going back and forth about this in Madam Web, but you make a good point. I think you actually convinced me. I think I would have to agree with you. Madam Web is also trash and terrible. And, I don't know when I'll ever watch it again, but I do remember distinctly, there are parts that are watchable that I can certainly laugh at and just, just let go of any pretentious nature about the film and just recognize it for what it is. I envision myself, for whatever reason, hopefully there is no reason, but if I ever have to rewatch any of these movies for anything, I envision myself popping in Madam Web before I do Kraven the Hunter.
That's how I feel. I agree.
But hopefully I don't have to do that, and I can just completely bypass them. I would just rather not if I can choose. But it's pretty bad. It's definitely towards the bottom. But Morbius is the shining piece of shit that they've developed. That's their best effort at making a truly bad movie. And this kind of completes, I think, one of the worst years that we've gotten in superhero cinema. It's pretty much all but official now. I think we got one good movie this year, Deadpool and Wolverine. which is flimsy in and of itself, to be honest with you. We talked all about that, but everything else that's come out this year, boy, it's been a rough one. And so as we head into 2025, I just implore all these studios and these filmmakers, it's kind of too late now because these movies are done, but we really got to turn the ship around if there's any hope, because right now we are in the trenches of the worst that we've seen in quite a long time. And Kraven has only added to that narrative, unfortunately. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the latest Sony Marvel movie, Kraven the Hunter. If you've checked out this movie, and I know you have not, let us know what you think.